Welcome back to the Jazari Qual Show. Jazari here with my co-host Tommy. We have another show for you guys here tonight. Tommy?
Hi. Yeah, we're going to talk about a few things tonight. We're going to be talking about tariffs at one point and kind of the threatened trade war we've been hearing about in the news recently. But before that, we're going to talk about a Supreme Court case that's actually going to be coming before the Supreme Court here soon, or arguments going to be placed on December 4th. One of my friends is actually involved in the case, my friend Jessie McGrath. She's actually going to be in attendance, and she's going to be one of the lawyers who's going to be on the Trans Bar Association and able to go before the court. I'll just read a brief bio about Jessie here before we have her on. Okay, so Jessie McGrath is the seasoned LA County Deputy District Attorney. She's been in that position for 36 years. She's has held various key roles, including Central Trials, Juvenile, and Major Narcotics Divisions, and played a pivotal role in establishing the Cyber Crimes Division. Currently, she serves as the deputy in charge of the Asset Forfeiture Section. Jessie is also an advocate for diversity and inclusion, representing the DA's office on LA County's Anti-Racism, Diversity, and Inclusion Program. Notably, she secured a conviction in her first murder trial in 1989 involving the death of a trans woman of color. Jessie has led high-profile consumer fraud protection cases against major companies like Apple, Uber, and Honda. Beyond her legal work, she's been a broad member of the APLA Health since 2016, supporting healthcare for the underserved LGBTQ community. A proud parent of 5, three of whom are law school graduates, Jessie came out as a transgender woman in 2014 and publicly transitioned in 2015. And she's here to talk about United States versus Scametti.
And she joined us now. Jessie, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking me. This is such a key moment coming up in the trans right fight that we have been undergoing for the last 10 years or so, and it's kind of the culmination on getting an understanding of what the court's going to hold, that the lower courts have to use as a basis for determining whether or not these restrictions that they're placing on trans healthcare are constitutional or not.
Mm-hmm. So do you want to tell us about the case that will be argued on December 4th before the Supreme Court?
Sure. It's a case that originated out of the state of Tennessee. They have, like so many other states, passed restrictions on trans youth healthcare, basically outlawing and imposing penalties on individuals who treat minors who are going through gender transition. And so it was filed in the district court there. And there was another case that was kind of along with it out of a neighboring state, but they only granted review for the case out of Tennessee. But after the district court, I believe, held that there was not a constitutional issue, it was taken up on appeal to the Circuit Court of Appeals. And I believe that's the 11th Circuit, but I'm not positive off the top of my head. There's so many of these cases that are going around that it's sometimes hard to keep track of which circuit they're coming out. It's like we in the 8th Circuit in Nebraska are still waiting for a decision out of Arkansas on the Brandt case, for the 8th Circuit to make a determination on what they view the standard of review is. But there's been a circuit split. And some circuits have held that it's only a rational basis review, and other circuits have held that it's entitled to intermediate scrutiny, which is a higher level of scrutiny. You have to have more justifications. And so the Supreme Court is going to be coming out and trying to decide on that.
Before we got on here, you kind of explained to us the three different judicial standards they apply to
constitutionality.
Yeah. So you said there was strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and rational basis. Can you kind of just describe that again?
Rational basis is just the government has to have some reason for enforcing the law. There's if it's not going against a suspect class, or it's not going against something that is entitled to a higher level of review, there just has to be some justification for it. And frankly, the allegation that they're protecting minors without anything more, that is generally found to be sufficient. Strict scrutiny, which is on the other end of the spectrum, is one that the state has to come in and show that it is extremely narrowly tailored to attack the right that they allegedly want to, the wrong they want to right, and it requires that it be narrowly tailored, and that that there's no other way to be able to attack this issue except for that. And that is generally reserved for suspect classes. That's generally the standard that they've used in looking at laws that impact racial related issues. And then in between that is what they call intermediate scrutiny. And you have to have more than just some idea. You have to have actually compelling interests that you're trying to correct. And it has to be such that, and there can't be any other way to do it type of thing that strict scrutiny has, but it's an elevated scrutiny. So it's kind of the middle ground, and that's generally what they've used in relationship to some of the sexual harassment and things like that, those types of laws.
Okay.
And
so
the argument in Skrmetti, and it was originally brought by the ACLU, and they handled the first appeals on this. The Biden administration made a petition to intervene on this case, and so it's now changed from what it was. I think it was originally Doe versus Skrmetti, and Skrmetti being the Attorney General of Tennessee, and it's now the U.S. versus Skrmetti, and because the government decided to intervene and take the position that this law is unconstitutional. It's illegally targeting individuals on the basis of their sex. It's violation of equal protection because a child who is not trans can receive the exact same medical treatment that a trans child receives, and that's perfectly legal.
Can you give us an example of that?
That is, for example, puberty blockers. In trans kids, puberty blockers are used to give them a little additional time to decide if truly living as their gender is what they want to do. And it gives them, it pauses the puberty so that, say, for example, a trans girl does not go through the male puberty, getting the Adam's apple, having their voice drop, growing facial hair. So it gives them a little additional time to make the determination that, yes, they want to proceed with transition. They want to, they feel that they need to live as the other gender. And then as they get older, when they get in the ages of 15, 16, 17, they can then take cross-sex hormones and undergo puberty in their gender that they are. And it's a way that allows them to get that additional time. Puberty blockers are medications that have been around for many, many years. They're used to treat precocious puberty. So somebody who's undergoing an early puberty, you have an 8-year-old girl who's suddenly, starting to menstruate, and they want to delay that aspect of puberty for a few years until they can be in the same time frame as their contemporaries and their peers. And so it puts a pause on the puberty for that reason. So that's the perfect example. If a young girl or a young boy starts their puberty early, and the doctors feel that it's in a medical best interest that they delay that, they're allowed to take puberty blockers. However, if it's being used as treatment for a transgender child, that is illegal to use the medication for that way. And so
Right.
it's singling out trans people for disparate treatment. They're saying, we're not going to let you use those type of things. So
Yeah, I was looking it up, and when it comes to this kind of culture war that's being waged, I think that the thing that opponents, they lead with, like, oh, surgeries, right? And because I think that to somebody who doesn't really understand what's going on there, I think it's kind of something that might be terrifying to them. But come to find that, like, the rate of surgeries is just nearly zero. The rate at which minors is getting surgeries is nearly zero.
Oh, for children, for people under the age of 18, yes.
Yeah.
Especially for a male to female undergoing a vaginoplasty. That rarely happens before a kid is 18. And if it does happen, it's usually because you have a kid who has been stable in their identity for many years, and they're looking at doing it over the summer in between finishing up high school and starting college, and so you can get it done, early on. And so that an example of that is Jazz Jennings. She had the surgery shortly before her 18th birthday because she knew she was going to Harvard. So as soon as she finished the high school aspect of it, she did the surgery so that she would have time to recover and be able to enjoy going off to college complete. And so that's generally where those happen. And I think in the United States, if there have been 20 of those surgeries done over the last 10 years, I would be surprised.
Yeah, that's the thing that I was looking up, that I think it was the Department of Health Policy for Harvard. They estimated that between the age of 15 and 17, maybe 2 in 100,000 trans minors are getting surgeries, which would be less than 10 people across the country, like, a year. I mean, not even close to 10. It would probably be like 5, maybe. And then
and that's for the surgery for male to female. Now, female to male, doing a mastectomy, those are done more. But if you look at even at those, it's not a particularly large number. I think it's like 300 a year, maybe, if that.
And then I looked it up in Tennessee. There's no minor who's ever had a gender affirming surgery in Tennessee. So it's like, me being the amateur is like, it feels like they're going out of their way to attack a problem that doesn't exist, right? And of course,
that's what we said in Nebraska when they were pushing these laws previously. It's a solution in search of a problem,
right?
Because this is not that serious of an issue, and it affects so few people. And literally, the same detransitioners appeared at these hearings. All these states that have passed these laws, they basically heard from the same detransitioners. There's like 12 people in the country that are detransitioners, some of whom have started lawsuits, most of which get dismissed because there's no basis for them. But these same group of kids or young adults now have shown up, and they're the same ones that appear at every hearing. Whereas the people who appear to testify against these laws all come from pretty much the state where the hearing is being held in, and there's hundreds and hundreds. So they listen to these 5 kids who all say that they had, a problem, and they were forced into this surgery by their doctors, which is generally BS, because they don't hand these surgeries out like candy.
Jesse, I'm here. Oh, sorry.
If you look at some of the cases like Chloe Clow out here in California, where she is sued, if you actually read the evidence of the case, the medical providers were trying to put brakes on. For example, when she first went in and she tried to get cross-sex hormones and get on puberty blockers, the first endocrinologist said, no, I'm not comfortable doing that. We need to wait a little bit. She and her family demanded a different endocrinologist to get them to agree to give her the medication. So she was the one pushing these things. It's not the doctors who are pushing this. It's the kids themselves and their families. And now she says, after dropping acid and having a conversation with God, she now realizes she was wrong, and that's why she's suing. So it's not a huge issue. Is it an issue for those who have gone through the surgery and now they regret it? Of course it is. But the rate of regret for transition-related healthcare and stuff is like 1%. People getting knee replacements have more complaints than people who undergo gender-affirming surgeries.
Right.
Jesse, I'm curious because you did mention Nebraska, and that's when I first met you when I was at the legislature when these laws were being passed. I just wanted to ask you really quick, what is is there much of a difference between the SB 1 that came out of Tennessee, the Senate Bill 1 and Legislative Bill 574? Are Nebraska and Tennessee within the same circuit? Would this ruling, however the Supreme Court rules, would that affect the bill or the law now here?
Well, they are substantially different in that Nebraska, when they finally did pass it, they did not pass the only restrictions they passed were for surgeries. The others they ceded to the state medical doctor to make the determination of the rules and regulations surrounding it. Whereas in Tennessee, they just outright banned it. So in Nebraska, if you are a trans youth, you can get puberty blockers, but you have to spend almost a year going through therapy, no more than 2 appointments a week, and you have to do 40 hours, I believe it is what the Tesmer finally came down with as his rules and regulations. As far as the applicability to Nebraska, yes, this is a U.S. Supreme Court case, and so its findings of what the standard of review is going to apply to all cases in the federal courts throughout the United States. We are in a different circuit than Tennessee. We are in the Eighth Circuit in Nebraska, and that is why we're closely watching the Brandt case that is in front of the Eighth Circuit. They had oral arguments on that, I believe, back in May, if I'm not mistaken. It may have been April. And they still have not issued a ruling in relationship to that. And the Eighth Circuit is hearing that case, what they call en banc, which is the entire court. Usually when a case goes to the appellate court in the federal system, there's a 3-judge panel that issues a decision. If somebody doesn't like it, they can request the court to do an en banc hearing in relationship to that, which is the entire, all the judges in the circuit listening and being able to vote on the issue. The Eighth Circuit, they didn't have it argued previously in front of a 3-judge panel. And so it was straight to an en banc hearing, and we're still waiting for that. Interesting side note, one of the judges on the Eighth Circuit is a guy I went to college and law school with. So Steve Graz, who is a former deputy AG for the state of Nebraska, is making a decision on that case. And I don't even know if he knows I'm trans. I've wanted to go by his chambers and say, hey, Steve, remember me?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have much hope for the Eighth Circuit either. They might even have... So there's 11 justices on the Eighth Circuit, and I only think 1 or 2 are Democratic appointments. But we had a case with the legal marijuana 2 years ago that went before the Eighth Circuit, and the opinion was just... So Nebraska was suing, saying that the 3/5 rule, you have to have like 5% of voters sign a petition in 3/5 of the county. We tried suing to say, well, that's unconstitutional. And the thing is we've actually had that kind of thing has gone before the Supreme Court in the past for both Illinois and Idaho, if I remember correctly. And for some reason, the Eighth Circuit was like, no, that doesn't violate the Constitution, which completely flew in the face of the previous cases and stuff. And then I was just really curious as to what their reasoning was. And I went through the entire opinion, and it was like, these guys are hacks. Like even the minority opinion by Justice Kelly like she just tore them to shreds. So, I mean, I don't have a lot of faith for the Eighth Circuit, but I mean, the Eighth Circuit could rule before the Supreme Court makes a ruling on Skermeti, correct?
I would assume that they're going to make a decision before Skermeti comes, because I don't expect the Skermeti decision to come out until June.
Yeah.
That's generally when the controversial cases end up getting decided.
Yeah, isn't that when they decide it and then they bail out?
And
yeah, they bail out time.
Vacation all summer, yes.
Yeah, and then they go on vacation. Yeah, I mean, can you explain to us a little bit more? You told us kind of before we went live what your role is with the oral arguments that are coming up.
Well, for me, I'm just going to be watching the oral arguments.
Yeah, so I wanted you to explain to us, for the people who didn't hear, just about kind of the, I don't know if coalition is the right word, of the attorneys that have come by and kind of what you will be doing that day and kind of just what to expect.
The Supreme Court does not televise their hearings, although they do have audio feeds, and so you'll be able to listen to it. I don't know if it's real time. It's been a while. I think it is.
It is, yeah.
And so you'll be able to hear it live while it's going on. The case was brought by the ACLU originally, and the federal government, the Solicitor General, has intervened. So on the day of the hearing, the court will call the case, and the Solicitor General will go first, and then because they've divided up the time between the Solicitor General and ACLU, Chase Stranglo, who is a trans man who has been fighting these laws all across the country and arguing in front of district courts and various appellate courts, is going to be doing the argument for the families in this case. There's, I believe, a half hour for argument from the petitioner, and then the state will get a half hour to respond. And generally, the petitioners reserve a little bit of time for being able to do some rebuttal, but I don't know if they'll do that in this case. There are going to be a lot of trans lawyers that are going to be there. I know that the National Trans Bar Association, which I'm on the board of directors of, for the last 3 years, we have had groups of attorneys that we have sponsored to be admitted to practice before the Supreme Court. And 2 years ago, I was one of the initial class members to do this the first time, and I believe there were 10 of us. I think we had 10 again last year, and then we have 8 coming this year. Now I know that they've put together various groups. The ACLU and some other groups are planning to have rallies outside the court and have other attorneys. One of the nice things about being admitted to practice before the U.S. Supreme Court and having that certificate is that there's a separate line of entrance for attorneys who are licensed to practice before the court. So we basically get an opportunity to see whatever arguments that we want to be able to get in on. So I'm assuming that a number of the folks who are getting newly admitted will be there, and the members of the Trans Bar Association who've been there now multiple times. We're sticking around solely for the purpose of attending the argument. We've known for quite a while when our ceremony was going to be held, and so I'm just extremely thankful that I didn't have to make a second trip back to DC. That I was planning on being there already. Now it's just okay. I just get one more night of a hotel room, and so my costs were not going to be that much compared to what it could have been if they had done it on a different day. But the argument lasts approximately an hour, and you can sometimes get a sense of how the court is feeling about something by the way that they ask questions, the questions that they ask, and it'll be interesting to see. It's going to be great for me. I get to have my little thing with Amy Coney Barrett again. It's like the last 2 years I've been studying, just basically 20 feet away from her, and we've smiled at each other while the introductions and the case was going on. So I think she recognizes me. So she'll probably recognize me again because I'm going to be there for the third time.
How does one prepare for a Supreme Court oral argument? Because you can have your argument all laid out and they can ask questions anytime and jump into your argument. So that can kind of throw you, I don't want to say throw you off your game, but you have to be able to think quick on your feet.
Oh, definitely. Appellate argument is extremely, extremely difficult. And then sometimes, judges ask incredibly stupid questions. And you have to respond not by saying, Your Honor, that is a stupid question. It's like, well, Your Honor, I really don't think that this is applicable to this case for this reason. However, yeah. So yes, yeah. And
yeah,
prepping for it, Chase has done these arguments in front of multiple federal appellate courts. Mm-hmm. He's done these arguments in front of judges on the trial level. I am sure that for the next few days, they're doing nothing but going over his argument, what it's going to be, what the possible questions that they are going to get from judges. They've gone through, I'm sure, all of the amicus briefs that have been submitted, looking for clues of questions that may pop up in relationship to those briefs. I'm a part of 2 of the amicus briefs that are currently pending before the court on this particular case. I was on an amicus brief also on this case, just in the application for cert, because the Supreme Court does not hear every case that gets decided by the appellate courts. In fact, they take a very, very, very small number of cases every year. So you have to really be on the ball with the issues in order to even get a hearing before the Supreme Court. But I, along with a number of other trans Americans, there are, I think, 63 of us on a brief talking about the benefits of trans healthcare and what gender affirming care did for us and how it turned our lives around and how beneficial it has been to leading a normal, healthy, productive life. And on that brief with me is, oh God, who do we have on there? Nicole Maines, who's like Supergirl, Jenny Boylan, who is used to be a columnist for the New York Times. I think Lily Wachowski from the director of The Matrix, Chris Mosier, who's a triathlete. We've got Elliot Page, the actor. And
Elliot Page, yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually, if you look up on the Supreme Court docket for that case, it is the amicus brief of Elliot Page and other transgender Americans. So I'm on that. And then the National Trans Bar Association partnered up with a couple of other organizations and did an amicus brief in support of getting this law overturned. So I've been following this case for quite a while. The group that has done the amicus briefs based on with Elliot Page and such, we've been doing these for a couple of years. We submitted one to the 8th Circuit on when the state of Arkansas appealed the temporary restraining order. So I was on an amicus brief in relationship to that. I'm also on an amicus brief in relationship to the actual finding once the trial court found that this case was unconstitutional. Then it went back up on appeal to the 8th. So I'm on that one. I've done the 9th Circuit, the 11th Circuit, I think 6 of the circuits we've done that amicus brief on. And I think that's a very powerful statement that talks about how much we gain from being able to receive health care.
Yeah. So one of the questions I have, did you say the Solicitor General will be arguing this case?
Yes.
Okay. So we know the oral arguments are coming in December 3rd. And the
December
case
4th,
is not
right?
likely. December 4th. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
And then the case is not likely to be resolved till June of next year. So we're having a change in the administration. So we're going to have a change in Solicitor General, and that's probably going to be a very different Solicitor General. So does that impact the case at all? Can the U.S. just suddenly change their position?
That's one of the things I'm a little concerned about. Yes, I think the U.S. government can come in and say, "Oh, we changed our mind." Luckily, this is not up on certiorari from the government doing the appeal. It was the ACL.
Oh,
So
okay.
the federal government moved to intervene. They may move to now withdraw on that intervention after the change of administration, but that is not going to change the argument that was had, and it's not going to change the fact that they're still going to have to decide this case because it's up on appeal by the ACLU.
Sure. But Chase Strangio, she's going to be arguing too, though, right?
He is, yeah.
Sorry.
He gets half of the argument time.
Okay. Okay, I see now. Yeah. I guess my only final thought is like, I know that I guess the plaintiffs are arguing on equal protections and due process, but it's just like, I think we're going to run into the tradition thing that it has just been a long tradition in American history. But it's just like, to me, the amateur on the outside looking in, it's just like, is this not about self-determination? This is not about the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and that sort of thing. It's like, what is the point of the Constitution if it wasn't for civil liberties?
The thing that absolutely blows my mind is you have all of these people who are talking about parental rights and rights of parents to make decisions for their kids and, getting government out of your lives. That's a standard Republican position, right?
Yeah.
And yet they are the ones who are attempting to remove choice and decision making from parents because they don't like the treatment. It's kind of a bizarro world to a certain extent, listening to Republicans talking about how they have the right to restrict your freedoms. I'm like, that's not the I belonged 2 years ago.
Well, I don't know if you've ever. Go ahead.
You can go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I don't know if you've ever heard me ranting at Nebraska Democratic Party, but I've complained so much about how we've let conservatives hijack the idea of what it means to be a patriot, and it's just like, yeah, if you want liberty and freedom, it should be something that is blanket. Like, it shouldn't be pick and choose, that sort of thing. So I just really wish that Democrats would do more of like trying to reclaim what it means to be a patriot. Like the superintendent of the Oklahoma schools recently pretty much is trying to make like prayer, like I guess like basically make Christianity like Oklahoma's state religion, right? And it's just like, well, they're ripping up the Establishment Clause. They're shredding the Constitution, and they're calling themselves patriots. And it's just like, what? Like, why can we not seem to just like push back against that and say that's very anti-American?
And it's an incredible grift that they're running there because the head of the State Board of Education, was it Reynolds or something like that, Ryan something or other.
Ryan,
he has stated that every classroom in Oklahoma has to have a Bible, and it has to be a Bible that's the King James Version, and it has to have a copy of the Declaration of Independence, and a copy of the Bill of Rights, and a copy of...
See, that's the wildest. So the thing about that is, we talked about this on the stream, I don't remember when, last week sometime. His argument for that, because he purchased the Trump-endorsed Bible,
because he set the standards and said it has to have all of these things, and that's the only Bible that has that.
Well, the thing too is that these days a lot of these kids have Chromebooks at school or iPads or things like that. They could definitely get a digital copy and it would save millions of dollars. But I mean, that's the thing about how you were talking about how people want the standard Republican stance is, freedom, limited government, you get to decide for your family, but you have these people trying to overarch and reach across. and impede on other people's lives and what they choose to do. And that's the most difficult thing about leadership. I know people who were upset that the school voucher bill did not go through here when we had that petition drive referendum, if you will. And the thing about that too, it's that like you can't get upset because somebody else might not want what you want for you and your family. And that's the thing that makes leadership extremely difficult, because it's like, where do you draw the line between, I'm emboldened in this position and I'm going to do everything that I want. The whole thing with the Oklahoma schools, the reason why it's a dangerous thing, even for, Christians who, are pretty solid in their faith, is what happens if you get, a superintendent of a different religion or a different faith, and start changing things up and start putting, the Quran or the Torah or other, religious texts in classrooms, because now we have opened that Pandora's box or can of worms.
They basically have to do that if they're putting in the Christianity, because you're not allowed to choose a state religion. That is wholly unconstitutional. And I know we had that issue in Nebraska this last legislative session with the introduction of the bill to replace school counselors with chaplains. And one of the arguments I made to the senators when I did that, I said, and I suppose you're going to be happy when, let's say there's a small town and they decide that they want the Church of Satan to have their counselor, their pastor or their chaplain be the one in the school. You're going to be happy with that, right? And they were like, "Oh, well, no, it's crazy."
Yeah, I mean that's the argument I try to make to my Republican friends who are just devil may care about it. It's like, listen, if we could be a Christian state, right, a theocracy where we cut down on everybody else's religious freedoms, and Christianity is the only state-sponsored religion, it can go the other way. We can be a brutal atheist state too. We could persecute Christians just as much. It's just like, that's why we have the Establishment Clause. Like that's why we don't want to go in any of those directions. And, that seems to turn some hairs. It's like, oh, you could persecute Christians too. It's like, yeah, in 100 years, there might be a cultural backlash and we might turn into like an atheist state and you could see Christians actually being persecuted. But,
they could close down all of the Christian churches as being against the state. Yeah.
It's like, you don't want that. You don't want to open that Pandora's box. But,
Jesse, I'm curious what your thoughts are. We were going over the other day the Republican legislative plan for Nebraska that came out. And Tommy, made the point that not every Republican senator, pays attention to that, because some of the issues in there are just culture war issues that they just don't want to get involved in. We saw how everything went, last, not this January, but, the year previous, 2023, that legislative session. And, one of the things were, the Sports and Spaces Act that might still come back up, LB 575. Is there anything?
Cal has already, and it's coming back in an even harsher version that will attack. I assume that she's, extremely upset that I used the women's room in the Nebraska Capitol. So they'll probably try to get Arch to change the rules that prohibit that. And she's indicated that she's going to do the Women's Bill of Rights, which Hillen has done the executive order on and put that in legislatively. So, yes.
So I'm just curious, is like, as we're heading into this legislative session, are there any senators that you have, scheduled to meet with, or any other things that you and maybe other advocates and activists are prepared to, help accomplish during this next legislative session?
I do know that there are groups and of differing individuals, different groups that have already started reaching out to senators. I have not yet reached out, but my intent is I would like to hopefully at least have the opportunity to talk with each of them on a one-on-one basis. I'm pretty sure that Senator Kauth, who is my state senator, because I live in Omaha.
That's wild, man. That's just
will refuse to meet with me. Yeah, I'm a DA in LA, but I do have a house in Omaha.
No,
And I
Yeah.
actually wanted to mention that. That's one of the first things I learned about you, and I thought, what a champion. So basically, you're domiciled in Nebraska because this was no, seriously, you're domiciled in Nebraska because this was your home, but you came back to be domiciled here because of the harsh bills, conservative bills we've been seeing. Is that right?
in 2023, I had decided I was going to argue about these bills somewhere because they were coming up so much. I had no idea Nebraska was going to jump into this and do this also.
Mhm.
And so I ended up coming back. I testified against both 575 and 574, as well as some other issues that had come up. And yes, when 575 passed, or 574 passed, I made a commitment to the families that were there fighting that I was going to come back and fight for them. And in July,
Hell yeah.
I bought a house in Omaha.
Yeah, like I spend a lot of time talking trash with fellow liberals. I feel like if you're not arguing with fellow liberals, there's something wrong. But I talk to my friends on the West Coast and the East Coast, and I'm like, hey, it's easy to be a liberal in California, but to see somebody who like actually comes back to this red state and actually fight for these sort of things, that's a lot of respect. I wish we had a million more just like you.
I wish I had more people that would be doing that also. I mean, I love Nebraska. It's where I grew up. It's where I graduated high school. It's where I played high school football. As much as I hated it, I liked basketball a lot better, and golf was a lot of fun because we could drink on the golf course while we were playing. But it was. I got my education. I'm a product of Nebraska public education. I graduated from a public high school. Graduated from UNL for my undergraduate. Graduated from UNL Law School, and so I owe who I am and where I'm at in life to the education I got in Nebraska, to the people that supported me. And so, yes, for me, it's personal. I was a legislative aide in the 80s for a state senator. I worked for Congresswoman Virginia Smith from the 3rd District. I was a staffer for her. So, and I'm a
so much life experience. So much life experience. When I hear people talk about that, I'm just like, whoa, like just the stories of what you've done and where you've been and, the people you've met along the way is just wild.
Yeah.
And I'm a small town farm kid from Max, Nebraska, and I'm here in LA, heading up, our asset forfeiture section, doing $15 million of taking money away from illegal narcotics dealers, putting it back into use for the community. I've spent 20 years doing consumer protection work, suing big corporations who are ripping off customers, and I did street crime. So yeah, to be this kid from middle of nowhere, Nebraska, and somehow get to have this incredible career, I owe thanks to the people of Nebraska for giving me that education. I owe it to the folks there to come back and fight for when I see them doing this type of injustice for a reason other than it's just simply religious bigotry. There is no real justification for denying trans people health care other than you don't like trans people. And Kauth, who is the major backer of all these bills, so when I indicated I was going to be moving back and I thought about potentially running against her, she went on a podcast and talked about, well, there's this man from LA who may move out and run against me, and his name is Jesse, but I will never use I will use his name, but I will never identify as a woman. He goes, it doesn't matter what you cut off, inject, insert, you'll always be a man. That's how cruel she was. And she said the reason why she does this is because it makes her feel bad. It makes her feel bad. So because...
Wait, what do you mean it makes her feel bad?
That's the justification she had for doing this. She goes, I'm not going to call a man a woman. I don't care what it is, because that makes me feel bad.
Jesse, I do want to ask you too one more thing, just because you mentioned the congresswoman that you had worked with. previously or worked for, we talked about Sarah McBride, who is going to be the first openly transgender member of Congress coming up this 119th session. And there has been just this all-out war about bathrooms with her. I mean, what is your take on that? Because all of these issues, targeting youth, saying these bans and these laws are to protect children, but it seems like it's just a part of a broader trend of discriminating against the trans community. What's your take on one? Delaware electing the very first openly transgender member of Congress, and two, kind of just this overall trend in the country and where we're headed, especially with Project 2025 and all that.
Yeah. I know Sarah. I got to meet her at the convention. She is also one of the people on that brief of 63 trans Americans. Sarah is also one of the people giving statements in that brief. It's funny that it's happening right now before she's even come in, and that they've introduced these resolutions and these bills. Nothing's gonna happen with any of those. That is all just performative BS so that Nancy Mace can do fundraising off that and get on TV, because there is no time within this session to introduce a new bill, get it through, and it'll never be signed. So this is all just performative, and they're just trying to rile up individuals because they don't have a plan on how to correct all of these issues. Project 2025 is a recipe for disaster with all that it entails to do. And I am shocked that so many people did vote the way they did, because even Musk has said that what they're planning on doing is going to cause problems. So all of this talk about you're worried about the price of eggs. Yeah, well, the price of eggs are going to go to 4 times that, because when you have the tariffs and you have the import restrictions and you have the reduction of employment of USDA inspectors, talking about cutting, 65 or 70% of the federal workforce.
Yeah, there goes me.
Who's going to do the work that they're doing on there? Not everybody is not doing anything. It's like there are real things that are tackled by government employees, and I'm truly frightened by Project 2025 and the mini 2025 that the Nebraska legislature's done. Although a lot of those things, that's just a repeat of a lot of things said in the past. And I'm hoping that there are still some common sense Republicans. We did have a couple of them, but I'm just afraid that they are so afraid of potentially being primaried. And
that's it. Yeah.
And so to have actual, workable issues of wanting to work with the other side, if you do that, then suddenly you're not going to get any support within your own party. And that's, I don't know how we got this way. Back when I was working in Congress and in the unicameral, there was congeniality, there was cooperation with each other. It wasn't this my way or the highway. Right. And that's something that is truly makes me sad that we can't have those honest discussions. I would love to have some honest discussions on, is there other things that we can do in relationship to trans rights to ensure that everybody, is comfortable? I would not mind having those conversations, but you can't start that conversation by saying, oh yeah, hey, Jesse, welcome to the table. You're invalid.
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head there. I wish the Nebraska public could know how many Republican senators do not care about waging these culture wars. They just feel like threatened, and they feel bullied into voting this way. I just wish people could know.
With it on a personal level.
Yeah, and they want to be there to solve actual problems. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember talking to, members of the unicameral saying that this is not what they came for. It's not what they came for. A lot of these culture war issues, and historically speaking, the Nebraska legislature has been one of the most least controversial and polarized in the country. But it wasn't until recently that these became the forefront running topics. I saw this video of Bernie Sanders from like 20 years ago. He was talking to a group of college students, and he was talking about how the Republican Party tries to split people, and fearmonger and turn people against each other so that they continue to come out on top. So it's just this constant fear mongering of this is going to happen to your kids if you don't do this, or people are trying to do this to your children. And that's the number one thing that scares any parent is, anyone that might try to, come for your child. And so this has been used as a tactic, I feel, to just further, political power and agendas, and to stay in place. And like you said, to be primaried, fear of being primaried and losing their seat. So.
And going back to the Sports and Spaces bill, it's something that the Nebraska State Activities Association has been regulating for over 10 years. In fact, their policies were used by other states because we were so forward thinking in Nebraska. A kid cannot compete in sports if they have an unfair competitive advantage. And that's, they say, oh, well, it's an unfair competitive advantage, or my kid's going to have to do this. It's like most of the time, kids don't care. They're playing with their friends, and it's like, how do you take, Jenny, who has played on club soccer, and now they're starting high school, and suddenly she can't play anymore.
Yeah. I was actually reading about the NSAA's policy on trans athletes. That policy was put into place in 2015. You know how many trans athletes we've had since that policy was put into place? 10.
I believe there were 9 applications and there have been 7 athletes.
So it's an incredibly low number. And out in Nebraska even said they don't think there's ever been more than 3 trans athletes in Nebraska at any one time for high school sports, at least. And it's just like, and it's like when you take that fact and you look at the fact that 57,000 Nebraska children are living in poverty, it's just like, do we not see the game given away there? Like, come on.
If you're so concerned about children, why didn't you jump at the chance to be able to feed them over the summer?
Exactly.
And
it's just like, I wish,
You can scream this is about protecting the kids all you want, but at the same time, it's like Bill Maher the other day when he was on with some guy, and the guy was talking about, protecting the kids, and it's like, there's like one trans kid playing sports in all of Nebraska. We're going to take the entire legislative session, blow it up to keep that one kid from being able to run cross country. And that's what they did. But as he said, it was, what is the leading cause of death of children in this country? And it's guns.
Yeah.
And so, he goes, save the hypocritical bullshit, and about, protecting children when you won't even do it on something that is dramatically, killing almost the highest cause of death of all kids.
Yeah. It surpassed traffic deaths a long time ago. Yeah,
That's
I mean,
funny.
it's just like,
I'm laughing when people take the legislature, just blow it up for this one issue.
They do.
I'm sorry. It's just, I think it.
It literally, we got nothing done for a friggin' year because they
I know
Timmy from being on the boys cross country team.
I don't know. I think they take advantage of people who just don't really understand trans issues. And like, I'm not trying to say that this should be like spearhead front of the policy for Democrats, but it's just like, it's civil rights. There's so many similarities to the past civil rights movements. It's just like, it's not that I care about trans rights so much. I care about civil rights, and it's just like, it's just so sad to see so many Democrats are starting to say, oh, the reason why we lost that election is because of woke policies. And it's just like, nobody ran on woke policies.
Well, it's not even. Well, the thing too is
they talk about that we spent all this time on these trans issues and all this other stuff, and Harris spoke about it once, Walz spoke about it once, and that was it. Instead, it was $215 million of Republican propaganda saying that this is what the Democrats are looking to do. We never ran on that issue. It wasn't even really much of a part of the discussion. We allowed the Republicans to frame the issue, and we did not fight back, and that was a mistake.
And that's not even just on that. Like, that's on every issue. The Democrats have a horrible job with messaging. One of my best friends in the whole world, she was talking about how, she was pissed about the whole hurricane situation and how people are only going to get $750 if they qualify. And I'm like, okay, but the other part of that argument then is that the president, the vice president, just doesn't have any legislative power because, my friend was talking about, the vice president not stepping up to help. And the other thing too, I'm like, you guys got to understand that Congress is the one that controls the nation's like purse strings, right? So the federal representatives for those states that got hit voted against, increased funding for FEMA, and then turn around and pin it on the Democrats. And then everybody believed them that it was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's fault.
Yeah.
Oh, and then when the projects like the Epley expansion and other infrastructure works are going on, the Republicans are all there, shoveling out the
doing a victory lap, yeah.
And they voted against it. They had nothing to do with it.
That's what I loved about Twitter the most, where people would start posting voting records when, congressmen and women and, just federal representatives were taking victory laps for legislation they voted against. And then people would just get like those screenshots trending like, you voted against this. What are you talking about? Shut up.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we're doing this. So we're making America great again. And it's like, yeah, you're making America great again based on democratic policies that were passed. And that's why our messaging is horrible, because we haven't done that. We haven't said, this was us.
Yeah. I was telling Jazar the other night that Democrats are not very good at marketing and Republicans are very good at it. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, we got to do some things. It's like, do you want to know why Donald Trump really wanted to send out stimulus checks? It's because he was going to be able to put his name on them.
Yep.
Right. And so the infrastructure bill should have had Biden on everything. But, we take the high road a little too much on these things. And it's just like, sometimes
and then
we got to, yeah.
And then what? We end up with a lost election. That's what happens.
Oh, I don't know. It's just like, I still daydream about the Build Back Better in its original form. It's like child care, child tax credit was doubled. I mean, you had everybody paying for school lunches, nobody having to pay for school lunches anymore. Just so much stuff in there. But then, of course, we got Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin coming in and just basically screwing us on that one. But
that's the other thing that I don't necessarily agree. Well, maybe that's not. How do I articulate this? So you guys remember how in 2020 when the Georgia runoff races were like literally the talk of the nation? This was afterward, they had everybody. They flew Barack Obama, and that guy I feel like he has not rested a lot since he left. Like, they have him flying and doing everything everywhere. But he was there, and Biden was there too, saying, get me the 2 senators, and stimulus checks will go out in 2 weeks. And then the Democrats end up with a 50-50 Senate, which also sucks because you can barely get anything done. And then, Georgia delivers Ossoff and Warnock. And then the next thing you know, Manchin and Sinema go off rogue. And then instead of it's like we're going to try to talk to our colleagues here to see what kind of consensus we can come to, it's, the American people got to go back out and vote in 2 more senators. And I feel like it's just this endless cycle of people getting people in, and then not a lot of progress is being made because somebody's deflecting, the checks clear. So people, switch up XYZ. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think one of the worst things we did was go to direct election of senators and not having them appointed by the states and the legislature.
You think so?
So get rid of the Senate.
Because now, look, we have millions and millions of out-of-state dollars pouring in to different states to turn the Senate elections.
Just need one.
And because it's only every 2 years, and there's a third of it each time, it allows them to be able to bring in candidates who aren't even from the friggin' state.
Yeah.
Get them ingrained. J.D. Vance is a senator from Ohio and now, vice president-elect because rich individuals in Silicon Valley spent millions and millions and millions of dollars to get him elected in Ohio, even though he's really not an Ohioan, I guess. And that happens in other states also. I mean, Josh Hawley does not live in Missouri.
Happened in Montana too, just recently.
And so it's allowing these oligarchs to come in and buy Senate seats and change things. Whereas, at least in the past, if it was the legislature that were making these appointments, that is spread out, among a larger pool, and it makes it, instead of, having to buy one election, you have to buy 36 elections across the state. It makes it much more difficult. And so I think that was kind of one of the things that we did, because we are a constitutional republic and a representative democracy. We took that aspect out of those checks and balances that we kind of had. And I think it kind of messed things up. And that I am a fan of the Electoral College. I know a lot of people aren't, but
are you really? Why? I'm not a fan of it.
because it requires candidates to go to different places. Although the way it's morphed into now, it's like you only have the 7 battleground states for the most part. But
well, that's the thing too, because I mean, I feel like being here in Nebraska, watching the battleground states, when they would do these town halls or what have you, and then they would have those voter panels and just people just saying, I don't know, I'm not sure. And I'm just like, this is what it's coming down to. It's coming down to this whole presidential election is coming down to these 7 battleground states with these 5 different counties, and the people in that county is saying that they don't know what they're going to do. Like,
it's kind of mind-blowing to us.
Gosh, I texted Tommy so many times freaking out about that. Like, are you serious? We're down to the wire. Yeah. This is it. Like, and you don't know?
But it also gives a state like Nebraska, because, we do have our unique way of divvying up electoral votes.
Yeah.
It makes Omaha a battleground.
Yeah. Well, Jesse, we could probably keep you here all night, but I know you probably got to... how long is your commute from your workplace to your house there in California?
It's an hour each way. If I leave later in the morning and later at night, otherwise it's like an hour and a half. Yeah.
Well,
thank you so much for taking the time to come on and chat with us. We're hoping that you'd be able to come back after the oral arguments to kind of give us a debriefing on what you saw, what you heard, who you met, how the vibe is, what people are feeling, what the vibe is. We would greatly appreciate that.
It's going to be interesting to see what the questions are and how people look. It's not a slam dunk case one way or the other, and it's going to come down to, how certain justices kind of view it through their lens of interpretation. And I was actually not surprised that on the gay and trans Title VII case that came down a few years ago, that it actually, I had actually thought we might actually get even one more vote from the conservative side. And if they stay true to their judicial principles, I think we win this. But as we have constantly seen, people's principles are not what they used to be.
I mean,
let me ask you
Brett, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you just one more question, just so that, what is riding on this Supreme Court decision? Pretty much best case scenario, worst case scenario. Is it that, if they uphold this ban out of Tennessee, will that just be just a blanket cover throughout the entire country? Or if they, depending on how they rule, is it still going to be every state, figures out what works for them?
This is the most consequential case for trans rights in this country probably ever. And it's going to dictate what can be done in relationship to trans rights. If they have it as a rational basis, you bet your ass Nebraska will pull my F off of my driver's license and make me put an M on there, even though I transitioned 10 years ago and I've lived as a woman for 10 years. It's that serious. It's like it will legalize government discrimination against trans people. And
Wow.
so there is a lot riding on this, and so that is why there's so much angst involved. And if you combine that with what the Trump administration has said and is planning to do to trans people, I mean, from day one, he's doing an executive order kicking us out of the military. There is no doubt he's going to change the rules and regulations around issuance of passports. He's going to change rules and regulations he's going to pull back the Title IX guidance that the Biden administration has given to schools about protection of trans kids. So if it just is a rational basis, you're going to see my life is going to turn upside down as far as what they're going to say, I can and can't do. So I'm going to be going in the men's room with you guys.
Okay.
And believe me, when I started my transition, the women were fine. It was the guys, because I wasn't full time, and so some days I would come in as Jesse, some days I would not. And when I was Jesse, I would use the ladies' room. When I was not, I would use the other. And guys would freak the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, be careful what you wish for. People complain all the time when a trans man goes into the bathroom they have to go into, and they're like, well, what are they doing in here? It's just like, okay, I guess they get no place to go.
Well, that's what you were saying, Tommy, about, Congresswoman-elect McBride. The men aren't going to be comfortable with her walking in there, like with Speaker Johnson saying that she's going to be treated as a man under House rules. But, that's going to make a lot of guys uncomfortable there.
And she's not going to have to do that, because they do have a lot of unisex restrooms throughout the Capitol when they did the redesign of it and such. And
it's just a hot button issue.
It's an issue that really wasn't. I mean, and if they had even bothered to ask her or speak to her, she was like, I'm not planning on using the ladies' room. I'm going to use one of the unisex ones. She has a bathroom in her office. For her, it wasn't.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
It was like, you're making all of this noise about something that I wasn't even going to do anyway. And I mean, for Nancy Mace to do 400 tweets over the course of 2 days.
Yeah.
Who's the one who's obsessed with this issue? Is it the trans rights advocates, or is it these people who just don't think that we have a right to exist?
Yeah.
So yes, I will be glad to come back and give you a lowdown on what I learned there and what all I find out.
We need more Democrats like you. You know what I'm saying? It's like we got to get them acting right here in Nebraska. So
and
doing it.
I'm still trying to make a decision if I'm going to stay there or if I'm going to eventually just go nonpartisan, because there are things about both parties I like and things about both parties that I dislike. And I saw how good Dan Osborne was able to do running on a nonpartisan basis. There may be a shot for that. I don't know.
Yeah, you wouldn't be the first one to leave the party. That's a problem the party's got to figure out, not us. Yeah.
Well, if you see Congresswoman-elect,
and I want to change it, I want to bring out and make it better. So I probably won't go out, but.
I was going to say, if you see Congresswoman-elect McBride, tell her we'd love to have her on stream. Just pass that along.
We are trying to get Mike Mason and I, or Mike Marichuk and I, cornered her on the floor of the convention in Chicago, and we are trying to get her to come back to Nebraska in May for our Lavender Gala that we have. Last year we had State Senator Danica Rome from Virginia. So
Oh, okay. Wow.
So we may get her in state at least.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much again. I know LA traffic. Not
Is what
fun.
it is.
Have you ever been to LA, Tommy?
I just get my self-drive on my Tesla and it'll take me home.
Oh, that's convenient. I wish I had something like that. But all right. Thank you so much again for hopping on. We'll reach out to you after everything, and the holidays and things like that, and we'll discuss.
Sounds good. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
You too,
You as
Jesse.
well. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. All right, Tommy. Second part of the show. Oh man, that was a long conversation. That was awesome, though.
You could just keep it going. That's long form media for you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how things go with these oral arguments, and
and people can listen to them live on December 4th.
Yeah, we'll December 4th is when this Supreme Court hearing is, or oral arguments are. Next up in the show, I wanted to talk a little bit about, let me go to my notes here, Trump's tariffs. So he is proposing a 10% tariff on all imports, along with from 10% additional to what has already been in place with China, and then also 25% specifically targeting goods from Mexico and Canada. And his argument is that it will bring back jobs to America, reduce dependence on foreign manufacturing, and also his rationale for it, according to his post on Truth Social, is that he wants Mexico and Canada to stop the drug and crime and fentanyl pouring in from the borders, and the tariffs are going to stay in place until they do that. I was shocked when he was talking about Canada, fentanyl and drugs from Canada. I'm just like,
yeah, I mean, it's like,
I was just in Canada this summer. Canada's nice.
I wonder if Canada's just being like, what did we do? Because like they have less illegal immigration to here than we do to there. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
have you seen that?
Like,
have you seen that 50 Cent's meme when he was like, I turn on the computer and he said F50. I said, what do you say F me for? Like, I feel like that is Canada. Canada's like, what did I do?
I have no idea.
Like the US and Canada have great relations.
Yeah, trying to get to that guy's head on this one. The only thing I could come up with is when people start calling him racist again from Mexico, he can be like, look, I banned the white people too, so not racist. I don't really know. But it's so ironic that there's so many people who voted for him over the price of eggs and how expensive things are, and he's about to just make pretty much everything expensive.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to talk about this a little bit. I want to show you this clip too that you mentioned, everything being more expensive, and then we'll come back and discuss.
Sure.
If you voted for Trump because you thought he was going to bring grocery prices down, I have some very bad news for you. A lot of our produce comes from Mexico. 2/3 of the tomatoes that Americans purchase are from Mexico. 90% of the avocados that they purchase are from Mexico, just to mention 2 examples. So that guac is definitely going to cost extra. If you voted for Trump because you thought he was going to bring down the cost of housing, a lot of our lumber, cement, other materials comes from Canada, which means that construction costs are going to go up. Not to mention all of the ways he's going to roil the U.S. auto industry, because a lot of autos cross borders in North America multiple times before they're ultimately finished and sold to consumers. Not to mention the fact that a lot of U.S. manufacturers purchase inputs, intermediate goods like metals and cement and other things from Canada, from Mexico, and not to mention even the retaliation that we should expect. All of which is going to be very bad for consumers, not to mention, again, many of the U.S. workers that Trump allegedly wants to help.
What about tequila?
Tequila, I would bet that that's going to suffer too.
I'm out. Count me.
That was Catherine Rempel, Washington Post economist and CNN contributor. Some of the things that I want to mention, let me grab my other notes here, on goods that come in from Canada. I was actually surprised when we were doing research for this show tonight. Oh, where is it? All right. Crude oil and petroleum products, natural gas, vehicle and automotive parts, aluminum and steel, lumber and wood products paper products, machinery and industrial equipment, food products, aircraft and parts, and also electricity. So, fun fact, there are, let me find my other notes. Oh my gosh, everything is kind of all over the place. Oh, all right, here it is. So I did not know this, but we import electricity from Canada. It's technically an import. Uh, the northern states rely on electricity from Canada, hydroelectric power. So a large portion of electricity imported from Canada comes from hydroelectric plants, providing clean and renewable energy. A lot of people are concerned about, you know, climate action, cross-border transmission lines. So New York and Quebec have an intersouth. The New York Quebec intersouth allows significant energy trade between those two regions. New England and Quebec, New Brunswick supplies power to states like Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. The Manitoba Hydro exports hydroelectric power to the Midwest, and power flows to help stabilize electricity supply in Michigan. So it's not just food and manufacturing and also just, tangible products in your hand. It's also light bills that are going to go up, which I didn't know. That shocked me. But
Yeah.
things from Mexico, avocados, tomatoes, berries, peppers, limes, beef, pork, shrimp, corn products, beans, cheese, tequila, and mezcal, canned vegetables, and tropical fruits. 90%
Yeah.
of avocados are imported from Mexico. I researched to see if those can grow here in the US, and they can in California and Florida. However, they rely on imports from Mexico when they are out of season here in the US.
Oh God. Like I was born and raised in Texas. I'm Hispanic. I ate a lot of avocados growing up. And the thing is avocados in Texas are so much more affordable than they are here in Nebraska. And now that's going away for all of them down there too. Like I really hope somebody, like as soon as he sent out that truth, conservative tweet, whatever, I hope somebody went to him and be like, you can't do that. Like you do not want to do that. And I hope that they figure out a way to give him some kind of out, because I don't think Trump is the one to admit defeat. He's always got to like come up with some kind of like excuse as to why he didn't do something he said he was going to do. But Trump, please take any excuse to take the L on this one. Whatever. Like, I don't care. Just back down, bud.
So, what kind of potential domestic impacts this is going to have? So, higher consumer prices, number one, obviously, inflationary pressure, supply chain disruptions. So, businesses that rely on imported components like car manufacturers and tech companies may face higher costs and delays, leading to potential layoffs and price hikes. This is just going to be passed on to the consumers. He masks this as a punishment on foreign governments, specifically Mexico. Talks about fentanyl pouring in from Mexico, talks about gangs and criminals coming in from Mexico, and that this is going to be in place until Mexico gets that under control from their migrants coming over. However, with the political implications, obviously, as the economist there was just saying, the trade wars that this is going to cause. You shared something about that in our group chat. Can you talk about it a little bit, Tommy? I don't know if you read into it a whole lot. With Mexico?
I talked about retaliation.
Yeah.
Mexico's president was like, fine, go ahead. We're going to also pass retaliatory tariffs on you too. And it's just like, we've known from history that there are some instances in which tariffs are like applicable, like you should use them. It's to protect a strategic industry here, but yeah, it's typically when you pass a tariff for no good reason, like there's a trade war, kind of Cold War sort of thing, to see who backs down first.
It's
so
like
we'll
playing a game of chicken.
Yeah, and they'll be like, well, we have to pass a retaliatory tariff because we got to get them to back down. I mean, there's no way we can just let them have a tariff and not do anything about it. So I mean, that's just the slippery slope. It's just gonna keep on spiraling out of control before somebody breaks. And at this point, I think it would be us who breaks first, because we're complaining about the cost of eggs and sort of thing. It's just like, you think eggs are expensive now? Well, your softwood lumber from Canada, which goes into most of our housing projects, that's going to go away. Housing is going to be even more expensive, and it's barely affordable for our generation anyway. So it's just like, I really hope he's just blowing smoke. But also there's that part of my head, the intrusive thoughts that are just like, do it. You won't do it. Do it.
So obviously, a lot of people have talked about, Biden leaving in place a lot of the tariffs that Trump had in place for China. Somebody said on Facebook earlier today was like, you guys you're complaining about tariffs, but you didn't even feel the Biden tariffs, but the tariffs that were left in from it. So they call them the Trump Biden tariffs.
Yeah.
So the Trump era tariffs from 2018 to 2020 primarily targeted specific goods like steel, aluminum, and Chinese tech products. They were part of a trade war strategy, as you mentioned, to pressure China into negotiating better trade terms. So the ones that Biden left in place, as he's kept many of them, his administration has softened their impact by issuing targeted exemptions to reduce strain on industries like manufacturing and agriculture so that consumers aren't feeling a lot of this cost being passed on to them. But his new proposal, Trump, would be across the board without exceptions, and a broad approach could have detrimental economic consequences for people.
Mm-hmm.
When you start talking about people feeling inflation at the grocery store, it's going to get worse. You're going to start feeling it with your light bill. You're going to start feeling it in ways that you didn't think that you were going to feel it before. And in that longer segment on CNN, they were talking about how people are already feeling this. Companies allegedly are canceling Christmas bonuses. Stores have come out and companies have put out like AutoZone. Geez, I can't think of all top of my head. AutoZone, Walmart, a bunch of other corporations that have talked about having to raise prices or purchase things in bulk that are imported for their products ahead of time. So, yeah, I mean, what are your overall thoughts on this? Like, what would you say like a year from now, if all of this is in place, what does a year from now look like to you?
I mean, well, no new. I mean, all those here in Lincoln, we have a lot of housing projects that are going on. And I remember during the pandemic, when the pandemic began and then lumber quickly got shut off, we just saw like housing development just stop like in place. We just saw houses were just not even half built, just stay there for years. It's going to be pretty glaring, when we see all these groceries prices go up. I just can't. I'm just kind of flabbergasted here, and I just hope it's something he threw out of his head, and then people quickly went to him and said, okay, no, you're not going to do that. And I just really hope he backs down, because it's just like, it's so unthinkable that he would place these tariffs on our trade partners who've actually been really good trade partners to us for a long time, for apparently no reason. He says it's because of fentanyl and immigration. And it's just like, well, I mean, there's two halves to the story. Yeah, we're taking the fentanyl and the drugs and we're consuming them here, but we're also sending Mexico a bunch of guns and money so the cartels can, keep on keeping their country a hellhole. And it's just like, this isn't just one side of a one-sided problem. I mean, it's like, it gets worse down there because we send them guns and money. So then more people want to come here. And it's just like, if you're just going to ignore that and just say it's because of Mexico, all their fault, let's put a tariff on there, you're going to make things incredibly worse. Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense in my mind how something like that could happen. But, I guess we'll just have to see, man. Yeah, but
And one thing that I
did
just still
mention,
can't. Sorry, go ahead.
you did mention that like Walmart has already said they're going to start increasing prices in anticipation. And it's just like, we're already learning this lesson and he's not even a president yet.
Yeah.
America going to learn. You're going to get a free, well, I guess not a free, but you're going to get a lesson in economics, guys.
Let me see if I can find it's maybe Walmart was one just came to mind. AutoZone for sure, Columbia Sportswear for sure, Stanley Black and Decker for sure have already said
Mhm.
they're going to come out and raise prices immediately because of this in anticipation. And there's been viral TikToks of people, like I said, allegedly saying that their company is canceling Christmas bonuses this year because they need to buy and stockpile products that are imported from China in anticipation, because at this point it's like we can't just wait and see, like, is he for real or not? Like, they got to be proactive from a business standpoint. That obviously makes sense, right? Like, if something is
Yeah.
coming in that's going to hurt your business, you don't want to wait. You want to be proactive about whatever precautions you want to take. So we will see, you know. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like in a year from now, we're just gonna come in just like with a cigarette in our hand, just like, what did he do today? You know, I mean, he's not even the president yet, and he's making these huge changes happen. That's so nuts, man. I've been trying to say, like, hey, liberals, let's have strategic caution, and it's just like I'm already becoming a hypocrite there. Like, it's just like I don't.
So okay, follow along my mental gymnastics here, okay? Because I was
I
thinking,
got it.
like, how could this make sense? Frame tariffs like it's a thing that's going to punish another country, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, Say that we're getting screwed over by XYZ. These are the problems you're going through. These are the countries responsible for it. So putting these tariffs is going to punish them. You plan on passing tax cuts for the wealthy and for people. You throw in regular people saying, yeah, I'm going to give you tax cuts. You go and start slashing the federal government. Just take a hacksaw and a chainsaw to it and a wrecking ball and start, cutting and eliminating departments, firing all these people, trying to eliminate $2 trillion. However, when Harris was campaigning, she was saying, his tariffs are a tax on the American people.
Mhm.
Do you think all of this is just to help fund the tax cuts for the 1%?
Maybe he thinks that, but it's just that's not how a tariff works. But
No. I don't mean just the tariff. I mean, like, the tariffs, the prices being passed on to the consumer, because that
yeah,
tariff gets paid to the federal government. You want to
for sure.
slash the federal government, right, in half. You want to, like, reduce as much spending, probably and that's what I'm saying. Is all of this part of a bigger picture to try to just fund the tax breaks for the 1%?
I mean, I bet some of that's into it. They just want to hollow out government so they can keep more of their money and, not have to deal with regulation and stuff. But in the end, I don't know if Trump even really has a plan besides revenge, taking on the quote unquote deep state. I mean, and then, I think he's had a lot of people come in and flatter him, people who've wanted to gut the administrative state is what they call it for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really. Yeah, I just think it's just a combination of he thinks that the government was out to get him, and now he has to go take an axe to it. And then also he's got flatterers from people like the Heritage Foundation coming in and saying, "Hey, we're mad at the government too. Let's join forces and just really tear everything up." At the end of the day, he does want to cut taxes for a lot of the rich people who funded his campaign. But I think some of it's just like chaos. Like, he wants revenge. People are in there, flattering him to do things they've always wanted to do. I mean, it's yeah, it's really hard to get into the mind of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing that I really want to talk about briefly, so you can go. It's already 9:30.
Yeah.
The Israeli-Hezbollah ceasefire deal. So after weeks of escalating tensions and violence, a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah has been reached. This fragile truce follows intense negotiations brokered by international intermediaries, including the United States and Qatar. Tonight, I wanted to talk just about the events leading up to it and what it means moving forward. So the recent escalation began weeks ago, like I said, with cross-border attacks between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Both sides exchanged heavy artillery and airstrikes, raising fears of a broader regional conflict. The then out of nowhere, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say out of nowhere, but just this ceasefire deal, I got a news alert saying that Benjamin Yahoo was urging his cabinet to accept the ceasefire deal. They said that they accomplished what they needed with weakening Hezbollah and want to continue to focus efforts on, the war that's taking place in Gaza. But like southern Lebanon has been I don't want to say completely destroyed, but like how do they recover from something like this? All the stuff that
Yeah.
all the infrastructure that has been destroyed, people being displaced, people being killed, humanitarian crisis going on in both places. Why do you think? I think I texted you something, and I think you briefly mentioned something about it, but
Well, I mean, like when you're a leader in a time of war, like of course you want your wins, but also the thing you're thinking in the back of your head, if you can't get your win, like you might get in too deep, you might escalate. Like if he wants to try to invade Lebanon and have an occupying force, if he's like felt like if he has to do that or he would lose face, like that's a possibility. Like people were talking about Israel like significantly occupying Lebanon for the foreseeable future, and it's like in certain ways you don't want that to happen. You want to take your win and roll off, because I mean it could become a very costly thing. That's what happened to Putin in Ukraine. He's looking for his win, but I think that Netanyahu is seeing that he can get his win. I mean, much of southern Lebanon has been destroyed. He's and credit where it's due. The Biden administration has been pressuring them for a long time over Lebanon and Hezbollah. But I mean, he I think he has room for a win, right? And he knows that like it's not been easy for everybody, because something like 60,000 Israelis have been displaced because of the conflict with Hezbollah. But like I think he can say, listen, we've severely weakened them. We basically destroyed all their infrastructure in southern Lebanon. We can declare our victory here, and then avoid having to put more into, investing more into this war with Hezbollah. So, I mean, I think that he's gotten to a point where he says he can stop and not lose face, and then also pressure from the U.S. And then also, I mean, the implication is if he keeps escalating with Hezbollah, like, I mean, you're talking like, getting closer to direct war with Iran, because that's who backs Hezbollah, and Iran's already shown that they're willing to lose face, So, I mean, I think it's one of those things. He just he doesn't want to get in too deep there, especially with Gaza being the main focus, and then succumbing to pressure, that sort of thing.
We'll see. I mean, it's a fragile deal. So who knows if it's gonna last. I mean, we could turn in the new year, be back at it again.
I mean, I just know that he, as soon as the war in Gaza is over with, and assuming nothing else escalates, I mean, he's already facing internal pressure from his opposition parties, right? There is going to be some kind of investigation into the October attacks, and there's no way he's going to be able to walk away from it with his career intact. So, I mean, he has certain motivation just to keep this whole thing going. So I was actually kind of surprised that they announced a push for a ceasefire, but maybe it's because he just thinks that he can run around with a W on this one.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is all we had for you guys today. Is there any other closing thoughts that you have, Tommy?
But yeah, just on the case that we had talked about with Jesse, it's just like, I know that it's easy for people to say that we're trying to be woke here, trying to, make this a big point, but it's just like, it's not, it's just civil rights. It's like the Democratic Party should be the party of the working class, but they should also be the party of civil rights. And it's just, remember who's like started these fights. It wasn't Democrats, it was Republicans. So in the end, it's like, if you're feeling weird or confused or anything about when you see these culture wars, just remember it's not just about this one community, it's about every community, and every community that has had to wage a civil rights fight. It's the same thing. It's just, this is the flavor of the of the conservative culture war. And just don't get it twisted. Like, this is something that people would do no matter the community. And as an American, if you consider yourself a patriot, remember that our greatest tradition is self-determination, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Arguably the main reason we have a U.S. Constitution, right? You should want people to have all of their civil liberties in place. One, because it's a great American ideal. And two, it could go both ways. They could come after you too. Don't let the government have this power. We should all be able to agree on that. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot more to talk about in some future episodes. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning into the live stream tonight. Be sure to like and share and subscribe if you have not already. And send us your thoughts. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. Let us know what you guys are thinking about all of these different issues with this case coming up being argued in front of the Supreme Court on December 4th. These tariffs and how that's going to impact you and your industry, or what you might be looking forward to in your near future. And also, how this conflict going on in the Middle East might, affect you and your loved ones and your families, or if you have any direct ties. But let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much for tuning into this live stream. This was the Jazari Qual Show. We'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.